Hey everyone, Craig with SingleLengthSchool.com here, and I've got today's tip, this week's tip for you. What we're going to cover today is actually give you guys some chipping tips. So these tips are going to work well for all of you that use single length irons, but it's also going to help those that don't use single length irons and may have traditional length wedges, to do your chipping around the green. So one of the things that I find my students have a lot of problems with, and I think there's probably a lot of you out there that have the same problem, is you guys tend to chunk when you chip. You're hitting behind the ball, you're not catching the ball cleanly. Sometimes you'll get under the ball and actually just pop it up and it's not going to go anywhere. And the other thing you have trouble with is distance control, especially with your chips. So these are some tricks and tips that I use with my students to help make sure that their chips are accurate, they're going the distance they want, and that they're hitting them solid. So we're helping to build that short game. So I'm going to take a step back here. I would have loved to have done this outside, but you know, we're still dealing with some winter weather. We did have a couple days here where we had some guys out on the course and we could get out and enjoy it, but today not so much. So I'm going to take a step back and give you guys a couple of these tips so you can practice these at home and get comfortable and get used to it. So step back here where you can actually see a little bit of everything. Now the first thing I want to tell you guys is select the club you're going to chip with wisely. So 90% of the time I'm chipping with my 60-degree wedge, and when I say chipping, I mean even kind of a small pitch shot within 50 yards. This technique works 50 yards and in, anywhere around the green. It's just a matter of, you know, making sure you have the right club. So 90% of the time it's my 60. Occasionally I will go to my sand wedge, my gap wedge, depending on if I need the ball to run out a little bit more, if I'm trying to control it on the green a little bit more. So first things first, just as we've talked about when it comes to iron setup, when it comes to chipping, the biggest reason people mishit chips is because they're not hitting down on the ball correctly. They're getting a little too wristy. And when I say a little too wristy, what I mean is a lot of people just set up, ball in the middle of their stance, and they want to use their wrist a lot to chip. So they're really not rotating their shoulders. You know, it's more of one of these. And that is never good, because when your wrists are doing the work, it's so hard to control. So we need to eliminate any wrist movement when we're working with our chips. So the first thing I would do is to recommend that you get used to rotating the shoulders, keeping the arms and the wrists locked, similar to a putting motion. So keep it locked. That's going to be the first part of getting more accurate and getting better chips. Secondly, the next thing you want to do is, because you're chipping, and a lot of times it's going to be out of the rough just because it's the nature of the beast, but anytime you're chipping, because you're using a 60-degree or a sand wedge or a gap wedge, something with a little more loft, the next thing you want to do is make sure that the club is actually going to make contact with the ball first and not the ground first. So again, if you're here and you've got the ball in the middle of your stance and you're chipping, it's going to be hard to hit down on the ball, if you even hit down into the ground at all. You know, another problem you will have is you'll skull chips because you're actually not hitting down into the ground. Next thing you know, you're just topping it and it's rolling across the green and going twice as far as what you wanted. So just like we do with our irons, we're going to take it and we're actually going to move our weight forward for our chip. This will de-loft the club a little bit and actually help you ensure that you're hitting down on the ball. So as you set up for your chip, you're going to take your weight and be about 65–70% towards your front leg. And as you can see, I've got this angle here where my shaft is forward. So when I now take my chip, I'm hitting down on that ball, ensuring that I can get under that ball and get it up out of the grass, up out of the fairway, and onto that green. So first two steps you guys need to get comfortable with is weight forward, and then no wrist, no arms, just turning those shoulders. So that shoulder turn is what's going to produce your distance and your power. Third thing, and this one's actually kind of important because this depends on the ball, where the ball lays, how it's laying in the grass, and how far you want it to fly. So if you're in a situation where the ball's sitting down in the rough and it's hard to get that club under it, next thing you want to do is adjust that ball position. So if it's down in the grass, you're going to want that ball toward your back foot, actually almost inside, just inside that back foot shoe. So if you're down deep, it's going to look something like this. And when you go forward, you're going to see this angle really gets sharp. But what that's going to do is ensure that the ball comes out. Now, the other thing this is going to do is going to keep the ball low. So keep that in mind when you're judging your distance. So a bad lie down, sitting down in the grass, put that ball back, get that foot or get that weight forward, and then all shoulders, no wrists, no arms. But keep in mind that ball's going to roll. So if that pin's on the other side of the green, you're going to want to land it a little before halfway and then let it roll out. So if that ball's kind of sitting in a mediocre lie, kind of somewhat down but somewhat up, you're going to take that ball position and you're actually going to split your back foot and the middle of your stance with that ball position. That's going to allow you to get it up a little bit. It's a little bit easier to get up because of the fact that the ball's sitting up just a little bit. But again, that ball position halfway between the middle of your stance and that back foot, again, weight forward, lock everything and rotate those shoulders. Now, final position is if that ball's sitting up in the rough or if it's sitting on fairway or the fringe, you want to stop it a little bit quicker and you have the ability to get under the ball, you're going to take that ball and that's going to be right in the middle of your stance. That's going to allow you to come under it a little bit more, put some more spin on the ball to help it stop, and get that ball a little bit closer to the hole when you land it. So, but it's the same thing. If it's sitting up or sitting on the fairway or the fringe, ball in the middle of the stance, weight forward, lock your arms and wrists, rotate those shoulders through. And that ball is going to carry, you can actually carry that a little bit closer to the pin, probably about 75% of the way to the pin, and then let it hit and it'll stop. So it'll roll out a couple feet, but it's going to stop a little bit quicker. So guys, with your chipping, if you're really having trouble or struggling around the greens, these are some tips that you want to make sure that you work on at home, work at the practice green with, work on the driving range with. And again, this works for me from 50 yards and in, and a lot of my students are doing the same thing. So all your power is coming from shoulder rotations. It's not coming from flexing your wrist or flexing your elbows. Everything from shoulders down is locked into position once you're there. Your weight's forward, and you just rotate those shoulders through. Let the shoulders determine the power. So if you guys do that, you're going to find out that you're going to become more accurate with your chips. You're going to have less trouble getting your chips to go where you want them to go. And in the end, you're going to drop strokes on your short game. So again, this is Craig from singlelengthschool.com. If you guys have any questions, want to interact with some of our other users, some of our students, head over to the website. We've got a forum in there where you guys can interact together. Also on the forum, we've got all our videos listed and our tips and tricks. If you guys have a question, you can drop an email. You can purchase online lessons where we will go back and forth with you through Skype or FaceTime or some kind of video conference. So you can also purchase the lessons. And again, if you want to keep up with some of the other things that we're doing, for instance, 2 weeks from now, I'll be in Florida, sunny Florida, golfing. I'll be posting some stuff to social media from that trip. Find us on Facebook or Instagram at Single Length School or over on Twitter at One Length School. So I hope this helps your short game, guys. Take the advice, give it a shot, give it some practice. You're going to dramatically drop strokes off your game. So this is Craig from singlelengthschool.com signing off. Until next week, we'll have another tip for you. Thanks, guys.